They fell behind 42-27, and then a rerun of their first encounter began to play out. Windham went cold, Ritztown became red hot, and took a last-second basket by Bill Cunningham to pull out a 45-43 win. Wyndham's 20-4 record gave them a high seed in the sectional tournament, and West jumped all over a 16-7 Hartville team that he thought was overrated. He ran the boys hard that week in practice. Larry McManus told me he thought they played around too hard. When they traveled to Kent State, they were exhausted from the horrendous second half schedule they played, and Hartville turned out to be anything but mediocre. Neither the offense nor the defense clicked. Although West rotated players in and out trying to find a spark, only Al Kinney finished in double figures as Windham fell 55-48. It was a loss that Clayton West would never forget. Jake Nutter, Bill Valiette, Larry McManus, and Don Clark were graduating. Clayton West would be going into the 1951-52 season with a half-empty tank. So no one expected Windham to do much that year. They wouldn't be blamed for being pessimistic, which made Clayton West all the more determined. As the new season began, the Korean War dominated the international headlines. The Cold War with Russia was one fallout from that conflict. The Record Courier began running a bizarre weekly column that was entitled, "How You Can Survive an Atomic Bomb." And Clayton West was going to make sure that Portage County knew that his bombers were coming. Now, only a blind person wouldn't know that the Windham Bombers were in town. West boys were the first team in the county to wear tight knit warm-up uniforms before the game. Now, in my speech I had a description, but I'd rather show you what the color of their warm-up uniforms were. Mr. Fowler, would you stand up, please? That was the color of the Windham Bombers warm-up uniform. Banana yellow. They looked like a bunch of chiquitas running around out on the floor. And we don't have a color. We've got black and white pictures, and you can imagine what they look like. And Larry McManus is real proud to have worn those colors, but, you know. Well, anyway. The rest of the league, they thought those were spiffy. Clayton West developed a new workout schedule, making the boys wear galoshes during practice to make them light on their feet later in the season. The Bombers that year featured seniors Al Kinney, Dick Clark, Stan Bermowitz, Bill Cunningham, and Claire Little. Don Sampson returned for his junior year, and West added only 3 players from the JV team. Pat Strome, who, as most of you know, passed away just last month, and 2 seniors, Dave Smith and Rich Brown. 2 close wins over Garrettsville and Leavittsburg and 1 easy win over Aurora started the season, leading up to an early December match with Manaway, who had won the county tournament the week before. It wasn't close. 65-35. The next night, an undersized Hiram team came to town, facing a Bomber squad that finally had height on its sides, since Perwoods, Kinney, and Sampson were all over 6 feet tall. McKinney lit up the courts for 32 points, and every single player on the team got into the scoring column. It would be a long time before they played again. Early season blizzards halted the basketball season for 3 long weeks. Now, senior Seata Osako was able to get to the Prince of Peace contest, where she won with a talk called the Big Binge, and I would love to know what that speech was about. But the basketball players couldn't take the road in sub-zero temperatures. Now, they finally got back into action in their annual holiday tournament. West had invited some big schools in to give his boys a test against a much more physical schedule, much more physical than the PCL offered. The opening game against Madison became a literal slugfest as Permowitz, Dick Clark, Don Sampson, and Bill Cunningham were all sent to the bench with 5 fouls apiece. Officials whistled over 60 fouls in the game. If West wanted physical, that's what he got. In the championship game, the Bombers thrashed Uniontown 66-45, but West wanted more. For his next game, he brought in Middle Branch High School. Now, it took a lot of Googling to find out where in the world Middle Branch High School was located, because it doesn't exist anymore. Middle Branch today is Canton Glen Oak High School, one of the biggest schools in the state of Ohio. They had been state semifinalists the year before. Coach West wanted to test his Bombers against the best in Ohio, and his boys responded, blasting the Diamonds off the court 71-41. The news of that win was swept off the sports pages by a frightening development in Maple Grove Park, which was swept by a massive hepatitis outbreak. The county health department sent 30 Red Cross nurses, including local nurse Elizabeth Papp, to begin inoculating everyone in the housing projects, including team mainstay Don Sampson. The health commissioner blasted sanitation conditions, saying in the newspaper on the front page that many residents don't even have garbage cans. They set their garbage out in the open as targets for all the wild dogs in the area, of which there are many. 900 Windham elementary students were forced to line up to get hepatitis shots. So, it was good news when basketball finally resumed to drown out the embarrassment of those degrading headlines that were appearing on the front page every day. Aurora and Garrettsville fell. Chardon came to town as the Bombers avenged the defeat of the previous year, 59-49. Manaway received another thumping. Longtime foe Ravenna Township was beaten by 14 points. And the next night, a tired team barely survived a scare by lowly Randolph. And now the boys from this tiny Portage County town were beginning to be noticed around the state of Ohio, because the Windham Bombers were now 15-0. Reporters began interviewing Clayton West about his players. The papers called Al Kinney baby-faced and rosy cheeks. Yeah. You know Al Kinney. It's hard to imagine, right? Now, West tried to counter this by saying that when Al goes up for a shot, something gives, and it isn't Al Kinney. He also said that he wouldn't know, there were no prima donnas on the Windham team because he wouldn't know how to coach a prima donna. Now, bitter coaches at other PCL schools said that Windham was only good because of its small court, that they'd get their comeuppance when they moved to the bigger floors. But what they didn't know was that once a week, Clayton West was taking his boys over to Western Reserve Academy to practice on their big floor. He was running his boys through endurance cross-country training to condition them. And when Clayton West took his graduate classes on Saturday morning at Kent State University, he took his players with him so that they could play pickup games on the very floor where the sectional tournament would be held.